Today, the world is not just watching a conflict, it is witnessing a slow-moving chain reaction that could redefine global power forever, because on March 20th, 2026, something changed, something that many people did not expect, and that was when Donald Trump made a statement that shocked diplomats, analysts, and markets all at once. He ruled out a ceasefire with Iran completely, saying you do not stop when you are winning, and that single sentence sent a signal across the world that this conflict is not ending anytime soon. But what makes this even more dangerous is not just what was said, it is what is happening behind the scenes, because while the world focuses on headlines, the real story is unfolding quietly in military movements, energy routes, and economic pressure points. And to understand how serious this situation is, you need to go beyond the surface, because this is not just about Iran and Israel anymore. This is about global control, influence, and survival in an increasingly unstable world. And right now, the Middle East has once again become the center of that storm, where every decision carries consequences far beyond its borders, because Israel has intensified its operations, launching strikes deeper into Iran, targeting strategic military infrastructure, while also expanding actions into neighboring regions like Lebanon. And this is not random, this is calculated, because every strike is designed to weaken Iran's ability to respond. But Iran is not backing down. Instead, it is adapting, responding with missile attacks and strategic disruptions that go beyond direct confrontation, because one of the most critical moves Iran has made is targeting the stability of global energy supply chains. And this is where the real danger begins, because when energy becomes a weapon, the entire world becomes a battlefield, and that battlefield is not limited to soldiers. It includes economies, businesses, and everyday people. And one of the most important choke points in this entire situation is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow passage through which a significant portion of the world's oil supply travels every single day. And when Iran signals that this route is at risk, markets react instantly, not tomorrow, not next week, but immediately, because fear travels faster than facts. And as tensions rise, insurance costs for oil tankers increase, shipping slows down, and prices begin to climb. And this is exactly what we are starting to see, with reports indicating sharp increases in oil prices in a very short period of time. And for the average person, this might seem distant, like something happening far away, but the reality is very different, because higher oil prices do not stay in the oil market. They spread into every part of the economy, from transportation to food to electricity, and suddenly a conflict thousands of miles away starts affecting the cost of your daily life. And this is why global leaders are under pressure, not just to respond militarily, but to manage the economic consequences of their decisions, because a prolonged conflict could trigger inflation shocks at a time when many economies are still recovering from previous crises. And this creates a difficult situation where every move carries risk, because escalating too quickly could lead to a larger war, but holding back could be seen as weakness. And that is why the messaging coming from leaders has been so mixed, because on one hand, there is strong language about dominance and control, and on the other hand, there are subtle hints that there might be attempts to wind things down. And this contradiction is not accidental, it is part of a strategy to maintain flexibility, but it also creates uncertainty. And uncertainty is one of the most dangerous forces in global markets, because when people do not know what will happen next, they prepare for the worst, and that preparation itself can create real consequences as investors move money, companies delay decisions, and governments activate emergency plans. And this is already beginning to happen as the United States increases its military presence in the region, deploying additional resources not just for combat, but also for defense and deterrence, because protecting key assets and allies has become a priority. But even within alliances, there are cracks beginning to show, because not every country is willing to take the same level of risk, and this creates tension within partnerships that were once considered stable. And when alliances start to weaken, the overall balance of power becomes more fragile. And this is exactly the kind of environment where small incidents can escalate quickly, because there are more actors, more variables, and more opportunities for miscalculation. And that is why experts are closely watching not just the major events, but also the smaller signals, because sometimes it is not the big actions that trigger escalation, it is the unexpected ones, a misinterpreted move, a delayed response, or even a technical error. And history has shown us that conflicts do not always grow because of planned decisions, sometimes they grow because of mistakes, and right now the system is under pressure with multiple forces interacting at the same time: military tension, economic stress, political messaging, and public perception all moving together. And when all of these elements align, the outcome becomes harder to predict. And this is where the global dimension of this conflict becomes even more important, because countries far from the region are already feeling the effects and preparing for potential scenarios, from energy shortages to supply chain disruptions and even financial instability, because in today's interconnected world, no major conflict remains isolated for long, and this is especially true when it involves key resources like energy, because energy is not just a commodity, it is the foundation of modern economies, and any disruption to that foundation can create ripple effects that spread rapidly across borders and industries. And this is why the situation with Qatar's liquefied natural gas exports is also being closely monitored, because if regional instability affects production or transportation, the impact could last for years, not just months, and that means long-term consequences for countries that depend on these supplies, especially in Europe and parts of Asia where alternative sources are limited or more expensive. And as demand increases and supply becomes uncertain, prices will naturally rise, creating pressure on governments to intervene and support consumers, but that support comes at a cost, and over time those costs add up, increasing debt and limiting future options. And this is how a regional conflict can slowly transform into a global economic challenge, and at the same time the human cost continues to grow, with reports of casualties increasing as attacks continue and infrastructure is damaged, affecting not just military targets, but also civilian areas. And this adds another layer of complexity, because humanitarian concerns begin to influence political decisions and public opinion, and as images and stories spread across media platforms, pressure builds on leaders to act in ways that are not just strategic, but also moral, and this creates a tension between what is effective and what is acceptable, and navigating that tension is one of the hardest challenges in any conflict, because there are no perfect choices, only trade-offs and consequences, and right now those decisions are being made in real time with incomplete information and high stakes, and that is why the next phase of this situation is so critical, because it will determine whether this conflict stabilizes, escalates, or transforms into something even larger. And at this moment, there are several possible paths. One path leads to controlled de-escalation, where back-channel negotiations slowly reduce tensions without public announcements. Another path leads to prolonged conflict, where neither side achieves a decisive advantage, and the situation continues with periodic escalations and temporary pauses. And then there is the most dangerous path, where a significant event triggers a rapid expansion, drawing in more countries and turning a regional conflict into a global crisis. And while it is impossible to predict exactly which path will unfold, what is clear is that the current trajectory is unstable and requires careful management. But stability requires trust, and right now trust is in short supply, because each side questions the intentions of the other, and without trust, even small steps toward peace become difficult. And this is why communication channels, both official and unofficial, play such an important role, because they allow for coordination and clarification even in the absence of agreement, and maintaining those channels can sometimes prevent misunderstandings from turning into escalation. But as tensions rise, those channels can also become strained or even cut off, increasing the risk of miscalculation. And this is the paradox of conflict: the more intense it becomes, the more communication is needed, but the harder it is to maintain. And this is where global institutions and mediators could potentially step in to facilitate dialogue, but their effectiveness depends on the willingness of the involved parties to engage, and at the moment that willingness appears limited, as both sides continue to emphasize strength and resolve. And this emphasis is not just for external audiences, it is also for internal ones, because leaders need to maintain support at home, and that support is influenced by perceptions of strength, success, and security. And this creates an additional layer of pressure, because decisions are not made in a vacuum. They are shaped by domestic politics, public opinion, and long-term strategic goals, and balancing all of these factors is extremely challenging, especially in a fast-moving situation where delays can be costly and mistakes can be irreversible. And this is why the coming days and weeks will be closely watched, not just for major announcements, but for subtle Changes in tone and behavior, because sometimes a shift in language can signal a shift in strategy, and those signals can provide clues about what might happen next. And as the world continues to monitor this situation, one thing is becoming increasingly clear: this is not just another news story. This is a developing event with the potential to reshape global dynamics in ways that are difficult to fully understand right now, and that is why staying informed, paying attention to details, and understanding the broader context is more important than ever, because in a world where everything is connected, events in one region can quickly become relevant everywhere. And as this story continues to unfold, the key question remains not just what is happening, but what happens next, and how will those outcomes affect the balance of power, the stability of economies, and the daily lives of people around the world. And until those answers become clearer, the world remains on edge, watching, waiting, and preparing for whatever comes next.